This changes everything.
The divorce papers were supposed to arrive next Tuesday. Instead, I found my wife's sister Lisa standing in our kitchen at 6 a.m., brewing coffee like she owned the place, wearing one of Rachel's robes and smirking at me like I was the hired help. "Morning, Tom," she said, not looking up from her phone. "Rachel's in the shower. She'll be down in a minute." I poured myself coffee, noting how Lisa had already claimed the good mug, my favorite Cubs mug that Rachel bought me for our 10th anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Didn't know you were staying over," I said. "Last-minute thing. We're planning the 4th of July barbecue at Mom and Dad's. You know how these things go." Actually, I didn't. Nobody had mentioned a BBQ to me, but then again, nobody mentioned much of anything to me anymore. I'd become a ghost in my own house, floating through rooms while Rachel made plans that somehow never included me. Rachel appeared 20 minutes later, hair still damp, wearing that blue sundress I used to love. She kissed Lisa on the cheek and barely glanced at me. "You're coming to the BBQ on Saturday, right?" she asked, but it felt more like a command than an invitation. "Wouldn't miss it," I lied. Lisa snorted. "Oh, this should be fun." "Rachel, remember that game we used to play at parties? The one where we'd ask all the uncomfortable questions?" "Lisa, don't," Rachel said, but she was smiling. "What game?" I asked, though I already knew I didn't want to hear the answer. "Truth or dare, but for married couples. You know, like, if your wife cheated, would you cry or get revenge? That kind of thing." The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. Sounds hilarious. "Oh, it will be," Lisa said, "especially with Mark coming." Mark, Rachel's co-worker from the HR department. The guy who'd been texting her at all hours, the one she claimed was just a friend going through a rough divorce. The same Mark whose cologne I'd smelled on her clothes 3 times in the past month. "Mark's coming to a family BBQ?" I asked. "He's practically family at this point," Lisa said. "Right, Rachel." Rachel shot her sister a warning look. "He's been helpful with some work stuff." I thought it would be nice to include him. Helpful. Right. I'd seen how helpful he was when I'd accidentally walked in on one of their work meetings at the coffee shop downtown. Very hands-on approach to HR consulting. Saturday arrived with the kind of oppressive heat that makes smart people stay indoors with air conditioning. Instead, I found myself standing in the Rivers family backyard, watching Rachel's father flip burgers while her mother fussed over potato salad and complained about the neighbor's music. "Tom," Rachel's dad called out. "Grab me a beer, would you?" I fetched him a Corona from the cooler, noting that someone had stocked it with expensive imported beer, not the usual Budweiser fare for a Rivers family gathering. "Thanks, son. How's work treating you?" "Can't complain," I said. "Shop's been busy. People always need their cars fixed." That's good. Honest work, fixing things." He flipped a burger with more force than necessary. "Some things can't be fixed, though. You know what I mean?" I wasn't sure if he was talking about cars or marriages, but I nodded anyway. Mark arrived fashionably late, driving a silver BMW that cost more than I made in 6 months. He stepped out wearing khakis and a polo shirt that probably cost more than my entire outfit, flashing that practiced smile that made me want to punch something. "Tom," he said, extending his hand like we were old friends. "Great to see you again." I shook his hand, noting the soft palm and manicured nails. This was the guy my wife was throwing away 21 years of marriage for, a soft-handed pretty boy with a fancy car and a gym membership. "Mark," I said, "nice ride." "Thanks, just got it detailed. I'm thinking about upgrading to the new model, but you know how it is. So many choices." Yeah, I knew exactly how it was. The afternoon dragged on with the usual family barbecue routine. Kids running around the yard, adults clustered in groups talking about work and weather and anything but the elephant in the room. I found myself gravitating toward the grill, helping Rachel's dad with the cooking, trying to stay busy and avoid conversation. That's when Lisa decided to liven things up. "Okay, everyone," she called out, clapping her hands. "Time for a little game." Rachel looked up from her conversation with Mark, alarm flashing across her face. "Lisa, maybe we should just... Come on, it'll be fun." Everyone gather around. We're going to play a little truth or dare. The adults formed a loose circle on the patio. I found myself sitting across from Rachel and Mark, who had somehow ended up next to each other on the bench swing. Her parents flanked me on either side like prison guards. "I'll start," Lisa announced. "Tom, truth or dare?" "Truth," I said, because I wasn't stupid enough to let Lisa dare me to do anything. "Okay, here's a good one." She grinned like a shark. "If your wife cheated on you, would you cry or would you get revenge?" The patio went dead silent. Even the kids seemed to sense the tension and stopped running around. Rachel's face had gone pale, and Mark was suddenly very interested in his beer bottle. "That's not really appropriate, Lisa," Rachel's mother said. "Oh, come on, Mom. It's just a hypothetical. Tom can handle it, can't you, Tom?" All eyes were on me. Rachel was staring at her hands, Mark was checking his phone, and Lisa was waiting for my answer with barely contained glee. "Well," I said slowly, "I guess that would depend on whether she was smart enough to hide it or dumb enough to get caught." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the group. Lisa's smile faltered slightly. "Your turn, Tom," she said. "Ask someone else." I looked around the circle, my gaze settling on Rachel. Rachel, truth or dare? She finally looked up, meeting my eyes for the first time all day. Truth. How long does it take you to decide if someone's worth the risk? It was a loaded question, and everyone knew it. Rachel's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. What do you mean? You know, like when you're thinking about making a big change in your life. How long do you usually think about it before you pull the trigger? I don't know. It depends on the situation. Months? Weeks? Or do you just go with your gut? Mark shifted uncomfortably. Rachel's parents were looking back and forth between us like they were watching a tennis match. I guess I try to think things through," Rachel said finally. "That's good," I said. "Thinking is important. Making sure you've considered all the consequences." Lisa jumped in to break the tension. "Okay, Rachel, your turn. Ask someone else." Rachel looked around the circle, her eyes landing on Mark. "Mark, truth or dare?" "Dare," he said, trying to inject some confidence into his voice. "I dare you to..." She paused, thinking. "I dare you to tell us the most romantic thing you've ever done for someone." Mark's face lit up. This was clearly his comfort zone. "Well, there was this time I surprised someone special by booking a weekend getaway to a little cabin up north, completely spontaneous. Just packed a bag and said, 'We're going on an adventure.'" My blood turned to ice water. I knew that cabin. Rachel had told me she was going there for a girls' weekend with Lisa last month, except Lisa had been in Chicago that weekend, posting pictures on Facebook from Navy Pier. "That sounds lovely," Rachel's mother said. "How thoughtful." "Yeah," I said. "Real thoughtful. I bet whoever you took really appreciated the spontaneity." Mark beamed. "She did. She said it was exactly what she needed." Rachel was staring at the ground again, her face flushed red. The game continued for another round, but I wasn't really listening anymore. My mind was racing, putting pieces together. The cabin story, the expensive beer, the way Mark and Rachel kept glancing at each other when they thought nobody was looking. Finally, Lisa decided to go for the kill shot. "Okay, one more round. This is a good one." She was practically vibrating with excitement. "Rachel, if Tom couldn't, perform in bed, what would you do about it?" The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Rachel's eyes went wide, and she shot a panicked look at Lisa. "Lisa, that's completely inappropriate," Rachel's father said. Oh, come on, Dad. It's just between family. Right, Rachel? Rachel looked around the circle, her face bright red. Then she looked at Mark, who gave her an encouraging nod. Well, she said, her voice getting stronger, I guess I'd have to find someone who could actually satisfy me. The group erupted in nervous laughter. Mark was grinning like he'd won the lottery. Lisa was clapping her hands in delight. Rachel! Her mother gasped. What? It's just hypothetical, right? Rachel said, but she was looking directly at me now. I mean, a woman has needs. If her husband can't meet them, what's she supposed to do? Just suffer in silence? More laughter. Someone whistled. Mark raised his beer bottle in a mock toast. Here's to women who know what they want, he said. And men who can deliver it, Rachel added, clinking her bottle against his. I sat there watching my wife publicly humiliate me, surrounded by her family and friends, all of them laughing at the joke that was my marriage, the joke that was me. I stood up slowly, brushing off my jeans. Well, I said, this has been educational. Oh, come on, Tom, Lisa said. Don't be such a baby. It's just a game. You're right, I said. It is just a game, and I think I'm done playing. I walked into the house, grabbed my keys from the kitchen counter, and headed for the front door. Behind me, I could hear Rachel calling my name, but I didn't turn around. As I drove home, I made a mental list of everything I needed to do. First, I was going to pack a bag. Then, I was going to disappear for a while. And while I was gone, I was going to figure out exactly how to make Rachel and Mark pay for turning my life into their private joke. The game was over. Time to start a new one. I spent the next 3 hours packing methodically. Not everything. I didn't want Rachel to panic and think I was leaving permanently. Not yet. Just enough clothes for a few weeks, my important documents, and the small safe from my workshop that contained my emergency cash. $2,300. Money I'd been saving from side jobs, cash that Rachel didn't know about. It wasn't much, but it would be enough to get started. I left a note on the kitchen table. Gone to clear my head. Don't wait up. T. By the time Rachel came home, I was already checked into the Motel 6 on the other side of town, sitting on a bed that had seen better decades, planning my next move. My phone started ringing around 10 p.m. Rachel's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to her message. Tom, where are you? Look, I'm sorry about today. Lisa was just being Lisa, you know how she gets. Come home so we can talk about this like adults. Like adults. Right. I deleted the message and turned off the phone. The next morning, I drove to the storage unit facility on Industrial Boulevard and rented a small unit under a fake name. Cash only, no questions asked. Then I went home while Rachel was at work and systematically began moving things out of the house. Not furniture or obvious stuff, just things that mattered to me. My tools from the garage workshop, photo albums from before Rachel and I got married, my father's watch, the baseball card collection I'd had since I was 12. I also installed a small digital recorder in the bedroom, hidden behind the dresser. If Rachel and Mark were going to use my house for their little rendezvous, I wanted proof. Over the next 2 weeks, I established a routine. I'd check out of the motel each morning, spend the day at work, then drive around town in the evening, sometimes stopping by the house to watch from a distance. Rachel's car was usually there, but so was Mark's BMW. They weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. On a Thursday night, I finally hit the jackpot. I slipped into the house through the back door while they were upstairs, retrieved the recorder, and listened to 2 hours of audio that would make a divorce lawyer salivate. He's such a loser, Rachel's voice came through clearly. 21 years I've wasted on him. 21 years of mediocre everything. You deserve so much better, Mark replied. A woman like you shouldn't have to settle. I know. God, I can't wait to be done with this charade. Once the divorce is final, we can stop sneaking around. Have you talked to a lawyer yet? Next week. Lisa knows someone who specializes in taking guys like Tom to the cleaners. By the time I'm done, he'll be lucky to keep his toolbox. I sat in my motel room that night, listening to the recording over and over, feeling something cold and hard crystallizing in my chest. Not anger. Anger was hot and messy and made you do stupid things. This was something else. Something calculating. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the county courthouse. I spent 3 hours in the records office, learning everything I could about divorce proceedings, asset division, and alimony calculations. Then I visited 3 different law firms, shopping for representation. The third one, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Hendricks, listened to my story with the kind of attention that made me think she'd heard it all before. "Mr. Carter," she said, "I'm going to be very direct with you. In Illinois, we have no-fault divorce, which means the adultery itself won't affect the property division. However, if you can prove that marital assets were used to support the affair, hotel rooms, gifts, trips, that's considered dissipation, and the court can compensate you for it. What kind of proof would I need? Credit card statements, bank records, receipts, the more detailed the better." She leaned forward. "You mentioned recordings. Those are admissible in Illinois as long as one party to the conversation consents, which means if you're recording conversations you're part of, you're fine. But if you're recording private conversations between your wife and her boyfriend, that's illegal wiretapping." "What if I found the recorder in my own bedroom, in my own house?" She smiled. "That's a gray area that tends to favor the homeowner, especially if the device was placed in a common area of the marital residence." I left her office with a retainer agreement and a clear understanding of what I needed to do. Patricia was expensive, but she was also hungry, and she had a reputation for being ruthless in divorce court. Over the next month, I became a ghost. I moved out of the motel and into a small apartment across town, paying cash for everything. I told Rachel I was staying with my buddy Jake from work, which was technically true. Jake had agreed to cover for me if she called. Meanwhile, I documented everything. I followed Rachel and Mark to restaurants, hotels, shopping trips. I photographed them together, noting dates, times, and locations. I went through our credit card statements and highlighted every charge that could be connected to the affair. The cabin weekend alone had cost $800 on our joint Visa card. Dinner at Romano's, the expensive Italian place Rachel claimed she'd never been to, showed up 3 times in 2 months, always on nights when she'd told me she was working late. But the real gold mine was Mark's own stupidity. The guy couldn't resist posting on social media. His Facebook and Instagram were full of pictures from places I recognized, the same restaurants where our credit card had been charged, the same hotel where Rachel had supposedly attended a work conference. In one particularly damning post, Mark had shared a photo of champagne glasses on a hotel room balcony with the caption, "Sometimes you have to celebrate the good things in life, even if you have to keep them secret for now. Worth it. New beginnings." The metadata on the photo showed it was taken at the Marriott downtown on the same night Rachel had told me she was at a mandatory HR training seminar. I printed everything, organized it in chronological order, and delivered it to Patricia in a 3-ring binder that would have made a forensic accountant weep with joy. "This is excellent work," she said, flipping through the documentation. "How long did this take you to compile?" "About 6 weeks. I've been thorough." "I can see that. Mr. Carter, I have to ask, what's your endgame here? Are you looking for a quick settlement, or do you want to make this hurt?" I thought about Rachel's laughter at the BBQ, about Mark's smug smile, about the recording where they'd called me a loser and planned to take me to the cleaners. "I want them to understand that actions have consequences," I said. "I want them to know that they picked the wrong guy to screw over." Patricia smiled, and for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I felt like I had an ally. "Then let's give them a lesson they'll never forget." Patricia struck on a Tuesday morning at exactly 10:47 a.m. I know the precise time because I was sitting in my car across the street from Rachel's office building, watching through binoculars as the process server walked through the front doors of Hartwell and Associates. I'd specifically requested that the papers be served at her workplace. Not because I was cruel, but because I wanted maximum impact. Rachel prided herself on her professional reputation, her carefully cultivated image as the competent HR manager who had everything under control. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Papers delivered. Phase 1 complete. I drove to the coffee shop 2 blocks away and waited. It took exactly 17 minutes for my phone to start ringing. Tom, what the hell is this? Rachel's voice was shaking with rage and something else. Fear, maybe. Hello, Rachel. I assume you're referring to the divorce papers. You can't be serious. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. Counseling? I almost laughed. Rachel, you've been screwing your coworker for months and planning to take me to the cleaners. What exactly would we tell the counselor? Silence on the other end. Then, how did you... Never mind. Tom, let's be reasonable about this. We don't need lawyers. We can handle this ourselves like civilized people. I tried being civilized. Remember the BBQ? When you publicly humiliated me in front of your entire family? How civilized was that? That was Lisa being stupid. You know how she is. No, Rachel. That was you showing me exactly what you think of our marriage. And now I'm showing you what I think of it. I hung up and turned the phone off. Patricia had advised me not to engage in lengthy conversations with Rachel until we had a better sense of her legal strategy. The next call came from Rachel's parents. Her father left a voicemail asking me to reconsider this rash decision and suggesting we meet for dinner to work things out as a family. I deleted it without responding. Then Lisa called, leaving a message that was pure venom. You pathetic little man. You think you can punish Rachel for outgrowing you? She deserves better than a grease monkey who can't even satisfy his own wife. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I saved that one. Patricia would find it useful. The real fireworks started when Patricia filed our response to what she correctly predicted would be Rachel's counterpetition. Rachel had hired Martin Kessler, a lawyer with a reputation for being aggressive but not particularly bright. His strategy was exactly what we'd expected. Paint me as the controlling husband who'd driven Rachel into another man's arms, demand alimony and a 60-40 split of assets in Rachel's favor. Patricia's response was surgical. We didn't just deny Rachel's claims, we buried them under an avalanche of evidence. The credit card statements showing $8,000 in dissipated marital assets, the photos of Rachel and Mark together, the social media posts that contradicted Rachel's timeline of when the affair started. But the crown jewel was the recording from our bedroom, where Rachel had explicitly stated her plan to take Tom to the cleaners and called our 21-year marriage a charade. Kessler tried to get the recording thrown out, claiming it was obtained illegally. Patricia demolished his motion with a 20-page brief, citing Illinois wiretapping statutes and case law establishing that homeowners have broad rights to record activities in their own bedrooms. Your Honor, Patricia argued during the hearing, Mr. Carter discovered this recording device in his own bedroom, in his own house. Illinois law is clear that there is no expectation of privacy when engaging in adulterous conduct in the marital residence. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s who'd probably seen every divorce trick in the book, was not impressed with Kessler's objections. Motion denied. The recording is admissible. Mr. A. Kessler, I suggest you advise your client that this court takes a dim view of attempts to dissipate marital assets in furtherance of extramarital relationships. That night, Rachel called me 16 times. I didn't answer any of them. The next phase was asset protection. Patricia had advised me to act quickly before Rachel could start hiding money or running up debt. We filed motions to freeze the joint accounts, prevent the sale of any major assets, and require both parties to account for all expenditures over $500. This is standard in contested divorces, Patricia explained, but given the evidence of dissipation, the court is likely to be very receptive to our requests. She was right. The judge granted our motions across the board, effectively putting Rachel on financial lockdown. No more expensive dinners with Mark. No more weekend getaways. No more using marital funds to support her affair. Rachel's response was predictable. She tried to turn the kids against me. Alex, our 19-year-old son, called me the day after the asset freeze went into effect. "Dad, what's going on?" Mom's freaking out, saying you're trying to leave her with nothing. That's not what's happening, son. I'm protecting what we've built together over 21 years. Your mother has been using our money to support her relationship with another man. Jesus, Dad! Are you sure? I mean, Mom said you guys were just having problems. I'm sure, Alex. I have proof. Your mother has been lying to all of us for months. There was a long pause. Then, what kind of proof? I told him about the credit card statements, the photos, the recordings. I didn't go into graphic detail, but I gave him enough information to understand that this wasn't a case of marital problems or growing apart. This was betrayal, plain and simple. I can't believe she'd do that, Alex said finally. I mean, I knew things were weird between you guys, but I thought... You thought what? I thought maybe you were the problem. Mom kept saying you were distant, that you didn't appreciate her. She made it sound like you were the one who'd given up on the marriage. And now? Another pause. Now I don't know what to believe. Believe the evidence, Alex. I'm not asking you to choose sides, but I need you to understand that I didn't start this fight. I'm just finishing it. Jessica, our 18-year-old daughter, was a harder sell. She'd always been closer to Rachel, and she called me 2 days later in tears. Daddy, please don't do this. Please don't destroy our family. Jess, sweetheart, I didn't destroy our family. Your mother did that when she decided to have an affair. But people make mistakes. Can't you forgive her? Can't you try to work it out? Some mistakes can be forgiven, Jess. But this wasn't a mistake. This was a choice your mother made over and over again for months. And when I found out about it, instead of being sorry, she tried to humiliate me in public and then planned to take everything I've worked for. She's still our mom. Yes, she is. And she'll always be your mom. But she's not going to be my wife anymore. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I know this is hard for you. Jessica hung up crying, and I felt like the worst father in the world. But Patricia had warned me that this would happen. Cheating spouses always try to use the children as weapons, she'd said. They'll paint you as the villain for not just quietly accepting the betrayal. You have to stay strong and trust that your kids will eventually understand. The real test came when Rachel's parents requested a meeting. They wanted to sit down with me as a family to discuss a reasonable resolution that would be best for everyone, especially the children. I agreed to meet them at a neutral location, a restaurant downtown where we were unlikely to cause a scene. Rachel's father, Robert, and her mother, Margaret, were waiting for me when I arrived, looking like they were attending a funeral. Tom, Robert said, standing to shake my hand. Thank you for coming. Robert, Margaret. I sat down across from them, noting that they'd chosen a corner booth where our conversation would be private. We're concerned about this situation, Margaret began. It's gotten so contentious, so public. People are talking. People have been talking for months, I said. They were talking when your daughter was sneaking around with Mark. They were talking at your BBQ when she humiliated me in front of everyone. The only difference now is that I'm not pretending everything is fine. Robert leaned forward. Tom, we know Rachel made mistakes. But don't you think this has gone far enough? You're destroying her reputation, her career. Is that really what you want? What I want is for people to understand that actions have consequences. Your daughter didn't just cheat on me, Robert. She planned to financially destroy me in the divorce. She called our marriage a charade and me a loser. She used our money to fund her affair and then laughed about it. But surely you can find it in your heart to forgive, Margaret said. For the children's sake, if nothing else. I looked at these people who had been my in-laws for over 2 decades, who had welcomed me into their family, who had bounced my children on their knees and celebrated every holiday and birthday with us. Margaret, if some man had treated Jessica the way Rachel treated me, would you tell her to forgive him for the sake of her children? She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. Would you tell her to just accept being cheated on and lied to and publicly humiliated because the man who did it to her was sorry? That's different, Robert said. Jessica's just a girl. No, Robert. It's not different. I deserve the same respect and dignity that you'd want for your granddaughter, and I'm going to make sure I get it. I left them sitting in that booth, probably wondering how the quiet, agreeable son-in-law they'd known for 20 years had turned into someone they didn't recognize. The truth was, I didn't recognize myself either. But I was starting to like the person I was becoming. Mark Weller made his first mistake when he tried to intimidate me at the grocery store. I was buying coffee and frozen dinners, the bachelor diet I'd grown accustomed to, when I felt someone tap my shoulder. I turned around to find Mark standing there, wearing his usual smug expression and a polo shirt that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Tom, buddy, we need to talk. I don't think we do, Mark. Look, this whole divorce thing is getting out of hand. Rachel's a mess, her family's upset, and frankly, you're making yourself look petty. I closed the freezer door and faced him directly. Petty? Come on, man. You had to know this marriage was over. Rachel's been unhappy for years. I just happened to be there when she finally decided to do something about it. You just happened to be there. Like you just happened to be at that cabin when she told me she was with her sister. Like you just happened to be at Romano's on our anniversary when she told me she was working late. Mark's confident expression flickered slightly. She told you about Romano's? She didn't have to. I have the credit card statements. $8,000, Mark. That's how much my wife spent on your relationship. $8,000 of my money. That's between you and Rachel. No, Mark. That's between me and you now. See, I've been doing some research on you. Did you know your ex-wife filed a restraining order against you 2 years ago? Something about harassment and stalking after she caught you cheating? The color drained from Mark's face. That was dismissed. After you agreed to stay away from her and her new boyfriend. Funny pattern you have there, Mark. You seem to specialize in married women. You don't know what you're talking about. I know that you're 38 years old and you've never had a relationship with a single woman that lasted more than 6 months. I know that you've been fired from 2 previous jobs for inappropriate conduct with female coworkers. I know that your BMW is leased, not owned, and you're 3 payments behind. Mark stepped closer, trying to use his height advantage to intimidate me. You need to back off, Tom. You're playing with fire here. Am I? I stepped closer too, close enough to smell his expensive cologne. Because from where I'm standing, you're the one who should be worried. See, Mark, I'm not some scared housewife you can bully. I'm a guy who fixes things for a living, and right now, I'm fixing the problem you created in my life. Is that a threat? It's a promise. You messed with the wrong family, Mark, and now you're going to find out what that costs. I walked away, leaving him standing there in the frozen foods aisle, probably wondering if I was crazy enough to actually do something about it. He didn't have to wonder long. Patricia had given me the name of a private investigator, a retired cop named Danny Morrison, who specialized in divorce cases. Danny was expensive, but he was also very good at finding information that people preferred to keep hidden. Mark Weller's got more problems than a leaky roof, Danny reported after a week of investigation. The guy's living paycheck to paycheck, despite what he wants people to think. That BMW, he's about to lose it. The fancy apartment, he's 2 months behind on rent. What else? He's got a gambling problem. Poker games, sports betting, casino trips. His credit cards are maxed out, and he owes money to some people who don't accept late payments. How much money? 12 grand to a bookie named Sal Torino. These guys don't send reminder notices, if you know what I mean. I knew exactly what he meant. Can you get me documentation? Photos, bank records, betting slips, the works. This guy's been using company credit cards to cover his gambling losses. His boss finds out he's not just fired, he's looking at embezzlement charges. What about his relationship with Rachel? How serious is it? Danny snorted. Serious? The guy's got dating profiles on 3 different sites, all active within the last month. He's been messaging women the whole time he's been with your wife. Want to see the screenshots? I did want to see them. And what I saw made me understand that Mark wasn't in love with Rachel. He was using her. She was convenient, generous with her husband's money, and naive enough to believe that she was special. Armed with this information, I decided it was time to have another conversation with Mark, but this time, I was going to control the circumstances. I waited in the parking lot outside his apartment complex on a Thursday evening, knowing he usually got home around 6:30. When his BMW pulled into the lot, I got out of my truck and walked over to intercept him. Hello, Mark. He looked startled, then annoyed. Tom, what are you doing here? This is harassment. This is a conversation. Get in your car. We're going for a drive. I'm not going anywhere with you. I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo Danny had taken of Mark leaving Sal Torino's social club. You owe $12,000 to a loan shark, Mark. Your rent's overdue, your credit cards are maxed out, and you're stealing from your company to cover gambling debts. You really want to have this conversation in public? Mark stared at the photo, his face going pale. How did you... Get in the car, Mark. Driver's seat. I'll ride shotgun. He got in the car. I directed him to drive to the industrial district on the outskirts of town, where we could talk without interruption. When he parked in an empty lot next to a defunct factory, I turned to face him. Here's how this is going to work, I said. You're going to disappear from Rachel's life. Permanently. No phone calls, no texts, no accidental meetings at work. You're going to transfer to another department, or better yet, find another job entirely. You can't make me do that. Actually, I can. See, I've got photos of you with 3 different women from those dating sites, all taken in the last month while you've been telling Rachel you love her. I've got documentation of your gambling debts and evidence that you've been using company funds to pay them off. I've got your ex-wife's phone number, and she's very interested in talking to Rachel about your history of stalking and harassment. Mark was sweating now, despite the air conditioning. What do you want? I want you gone. Out of Rachel's life, out of this town if possible. You've got 1 week to make it happen. And if I don't? Then I call your boss and show him the evidence of embezzlement. I call Sal Torino and let him know where you live and work. I call Rachel and show her the screenshots of you hitting on other women. And then I sit back and watch your life implode. You bastard. No, Mark. I'm the guy whose life you tried to destroy. The difference is, I'm better at it than you are. I got out of the car and started walking back toward my truck. Mark rolled down the window and called after me. Rachel's not going to just forget about me. She loves me. I turned back to look at him. No, Mark. She loves the idea of you, the fantasy you sold her about being rescued from her boring marriage. But when she finds out you're broke, desperate, and cheating on her with other women, that fantasy's going to die pretty quickly. You don't know her like I do. I know her better than you ever will. I know she's vain and selfish and always looking for someone to blame for her problems. Right now, I'm the villain in her story. But when you disappear and leave her to face the consequences of her choices alone, she'll figure out pretty quickly who the real villain was. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. Mark would run. Guys like him always did when the pressure got too intense. And when he did, Rachel would finally understand that she'd thrown away a 21-year marriage for a man who was never worth it in the first place. Sure enough, Mark called in sick on Friday and never came back to work. His apartment was empty by Sunday, and his BMW was repossessed on Monday morning. Rachel called me that night crying, "Tom, please, can we talk? Mark's gone and I don't understand what happened. I need someone to help me figure this out." "Figure what out, Rachel?" "He just disappeared. No explanation, no goodbye. He won't answer his phone. I went to his apartment, and the landlord said he moved out in the middle of the night. Maybe he found someone else. That's not possible. He loved me. He said we were going to be together." Rachel, did you ever wonder how a guy who makes $40,000 a year could afford to take you to expensive restaurants and weekend getaways? Silence on the other end. Did you ever ask yourself why a man who claimed to love you was still active on dating websites? What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that you threw away our marriage for a con man who was using you for your money and your body while he looked for something better. That's not true. It's completely true, Rachel. And deep down, you know it. You just don't want to admit that you destroyed our family for a man who never gave a damn about you. I hung up the phone and poured myself a beer. Tomorrow, Patricia and I would start preparing for the final phase of the divorce proceedings. But tonight, I was going to celebrate the fact that Mark Weller was no longer my problem. Now it was time to focus on making sure Rachel understood the full cost of her choices. With Mark out of the picture, Rachel's strategy shifted to damage control. She fired Martin Kessler and hired a new lawyer, someone with a reputation for handling high-conflict divorces and wealthy clients. Elizabeth Hartwell was everything Kessler wasn't: smart, ruthless, and expensive. "She's good," Patricia warned me during our strategy meeting. "Hartwell's going to try to paint you as the obsessive, controlling husband who drove Rachel into another man's arms. She'll argue that your surveillance and investigation constitute harassment, and she'll push for a restraining order to limit your access to evidence." Can she do that? She can try, but we've got everything documented and filed with the court already. The horse is out of the barn, so to speak. Patricia was right about Hartwell's strategy. The new lawyer immediately filed motions claiming I had engaged in stalking, harassment, and illegal surveillance. She demanded that all evidence obtained through invasive and obsessive behavior be thrown out, and she requested a restraining order that would prevent me from coming within 500 feet of Rachel's workplace or residence. The hearing on these motions was scheduled for a Friday morning in early October. I wore my best suit, the one I'd bought for Alex's high school graduation, and tried to look like a reasonable man who'd been pushed too far, not a vindictive ex-husband seeking revenge. Hartwell was everything I'd expected: tall, elegant, with silver hair, and the kind of confidence that comes from winning more cases than you lose. She presented her argument with surgical precision. "Your Honor, Mr. Carter's behavior over the past several months has been nothing short of obsessive. He has stalked my client and her former boyfriend, conducted illegal surveillance, hired private investigators to harass them, and engaged in a systematic campaign of intimidation designed to destroy their reputations and careers." She painted a picture of me as a dangerous man who couldn't accept that his marriage was over, someone who had escalated from passive-aggressive behavior to active stalking. It was a compelling narrative, and I could see the judge listening carefully. Then Patricia stood up for our response. "Your Honor, Ms. Hartwell would have this court believe that a husband discovering his wife's adultery and taking legal steps to protect his financial interests constitutes harassment. This is simply not the case." Patricia methodically dismantled Hartwell's arguments. The surveillance was conducted on public property or in the marital residence. The private investigator was hired to gather evidence for legitimate divorce proceedings. The documentation of Rachel's affair and the dissipation of marital assets was not harassment. It was due diligence. Mr. Carter discovered that his wife was using marital funds to support an extramarital relationship, Patricia continued. He documented this behavior and filed for divorce when the respondent's boyfriend attempted to intimidate Mr. Carter in a public place. Mr. Carter defended himself by making it clear that he was aware of Mr. Weller's financial and legal problems. This is not stalking, Your Honor. This is a man protecting himself and his assets from people who were actively trying to defraud him. The judge asked several pointed questions about the timeline of events and the methods used to gather evidence. Patricia answered each one with specific citations to Illinois law and precedent. In the end, the judge denied all of Hartwell's motions. While the court sympathizes with the respondent's discomfort at having her private life exposed, the evidence clearly shows that the petitioner acted within his legal rights to investigate and document the dissipation of marital assets. The motion for a restraining order is denied, as is the motion to suppress evidence. Hartwell's face remained professionally neutral, but I could see the frustration in her eyes. She'd played her best cards and come up empty. After the hearing, Patricia and I went to lunch to discuss strategy for the next phase. Hartwell's going to push for a quick settlement now, she predicted. She knows we have Rachel dead to rights on the dissipation issue, and she doesn't want this to go to trial where all the dirty details become public record. What kind of settlement do you think they'll offer? Probably 50-50 on assets, no alimony, and they'll agree to reimburse you for the dissipated funds. It's not a bad deal, Tom. You'd walk away whole, and this would all be over. I thought about it while I ate my sandwich. A clean break, no more legal fees, no more drama. I could take my half of our assets, start over, and try to rebuild some kind of relationship with my kids. But then I remembered Rachel's laughter at the BBQ, her plan to take me to the cleaners, the way she'd looked at Mark when she thought I wasn't watching. No, I said finally. I don't want a settlement. I want this to go to trial. Tom, I have to advise you that trials are expensive and unpredictable. Even with our strong evidence, there's always a risk. I don't care about the risk. I want Rachel to have to sit in a courtroom and listen while every detail of her affair is read into the public record. I want her family and friends to hear exactly what she said about me, about our marriage, about her plans to destroy me financially. I want consequences, Patricia. Real consequences. Patricia studied my face for a long moment. Are you sure about this? Because once we go to trial, there's no going back. Everything becomes public. Your kids will hear things about their mother that they can never unhear. My kids deserve to know the truth. They've been living with Rachel's version of events for months now. It's time they heard the whole story. All right then. We go to trial. The trial was scheduled for January, which gave both sides time to prepare their cases. Hartwell tried twice more to negotiate a settlement, but I refused both offers. I wanted my day in court. In the meantime, I focused on rebuilding my relationship with Alex and Jessica. Alex had come around to my side after I showed him some of the evidence, but Jessica was still torn between loyalty to her mother and the growing realization that Rachel had lied to everyone about what had really happened. The breakthrough came in December, when Jessica called me crying. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Of course, sweetheart. What is it? Did Mom really say that stuff about taking you to the cleaners? Did she really call your marriage a charade? I closed my eyes, knowing that this moment would change Jessica's relationship with her mother forever. Yes, Jess. She did. I have it on tape. Can I hear it? Sweetheart, I don't think... Please, Dad. I need to know. Mom's been telling me that you're making everything up, that you're trying to turn me and Alex against her. But Alex believes you, and I don't know what to think anymore. I played her a short excerpt from the recording, just the part where Rachel talked about taking me to the cleaners and called our marriage a charade. I didn't include the more explicit sexual content or the cruel personal attacks. Jessica listened in silence, and when it was over, she was quiet for a long time. I can't believe she said that, she whispered finally. I'm sorry, Jess. I know this is hard to hear. She's been lying to me for months. Every time I asked her about Mark, about the divorce, about what really happened, she made it sound like you were the problem. She said you were controlling and jealous and that you couldn't handle her being happy. Your mother is very good at telling people what they want to hear. It's one of her talents. I feel so stupid. I actually felt sorry for her. I thought you were being mean and vindictive. You're not stupid, sweetheart. You love your mother, and you wanted to believe the best about her. That's not stupid. That's loyal and loving. But now you know the truth. What am I supposed to do with this? How am I supposed to look at her and pretend I don't know what she really thinks about our family? You don't have to pretend anything, Jess. You just have to decide what kind of relationship you want to have with her going forward. She's still your mother, and she loves you in her own way. But she's also someone who made some very selfish choices that hurt a lot of people. I don't know if I can forgive her for this. You don't have to decide that right now. Just focus on taking care of yourself and getting through the next few months. The trial's going to be hard on all of us. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment thinking about the cost of Rachel's choices. She hadn't just destroyed our marriage, she'd damaged her relationships with both of our children, probably permanently. Alex was openly angry with her, and now Jessica was questioning everything she'd been told. The irony was that if Rachel had just been honest from the beginning, if she'd come to me and said she was unhappy and wanted a divorce, I probably would have agreed to an amicable split. We could have divided our assets fairly, worked out a reasonable arrangement for the kids, and moved on with our lives. But Rachel had chosen deception, betrayal, and humiliation instead. She'd decided to make me the villain in her story, to steal from our joint accounts to fund her affair, and to plan my financial destruction. Now she was going to face the consequences of those choices in the most public way possible. The trial was 3 weeks away, and I was ready. The Cook County Courthouse was busier than I'd expected on a cold January morning. Patricia and I arrived early, carrying boxes of evidence and documentation that represented months of investigation and preparation. I wore my best suit again, but this time I felt different, not like a man trying to look respectable, but like a man who belonged here. Rachel arrived with Elizabeth Hartwell and a small entourage that included her parents and Lisa. She'd lost weight since I'd last seen her, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. She looked fragile, vulnerable, exactly the image Hartwell wanted to project to the judge. Judge Margaret Chen was a no-nonsense woman in her early 60s, with a reputation for being fair but tough. She'd been handling family court cases for over 20 years, and according to Patricia, she had little patience for games or theatrics. "This is a dissolution of marriage case," Judge Chen began. "We're here to determine the equitable division of marital assets and to address allegations of dissipation of marital property. Miss Hartwell, you may present your opening statement." Hartwell stood and walked to the center of the courtroom, commanding attention with her presence. "Your Honor, this is a case about a marriage that died a natural death and a husband who couldn't accept that reality. Rachel Carter is a successful professional woman who found herself trapped in a loveless marriage with a man who had become emotionally distant and increasingly controlling. She painted a picture of Rachel as the victim, a woman who had tried to save her marriage but finally found the courage to seek happiness elsewhere, only to be stalked and harassed by a vindictive husband who couldn't let go. Mr. Carter's behavior over the past year has been nothing short of obsessive," Hartwell continued. "He hired private investigators, conducted illegal surveillance, and engaged in a systematic campaign of intimidation against my client and her former boyfriend. This is not the behavior of a wronged husband seeking justice. This is the behavior of a man who views his wife as property that he refuses to relinquish." It was a compelling narrative, skillfully delivered. If I hadn't lived through the actual events, I might have been convinced myself. Then Patricia stood for our opening statement. "Your Honor, this case is indeed about a marriage that ended, but it didn't die a natural death. It was murdered by Rachel Carter's deliberate choice to engage in an extramarital affair while systematically stealing from the marital estate to fund that affair. Patricia's tone was calm, factual, clinical. She wasn't trying to evoke emotion, she was presenting evidence. The evidence will show that Mrs. Carter spent over $8,000 of marital funds on her relationship with Mark Weller. She lied to her husband about her whereabouts, used joint credit cards to pay for hotel rooms and expensive dinners with her lover, and when confronted with the possibility of discovery, she planned to take him to the cleaners in the divorce proceedings. Patricia outlined our evidence methodically: the credit card statements, the photographs, the recordings, the documentation of Rachel's lies and deception. This is not a case about a controlling husband, Your Honor. This is a case about a cheating wife who got caught and is now trying to rewrite history to avoid the consequences of her actions. The first witness Hartwell called was Rachel herself. She took the stand wearing a conservative navy dress and minimal jewelry, looking like someone's sympathetic sister rather than an adulteress. Under Hartwell's questioning, Rachel told her version of events. Our marriage had been troubled for years. I was emotionally distant, uninterested in her needs, resistant to counseling or change. She'd tried to make it work, but eventually she'd given up hope. I met Mark at a work conference, she testified. He was kind and attentive in ways that Tom hadn't been in years. At first, we were just friends. I wasn't looking for an affair. When did the relationship become romantic? Hartwell asked. Gradually. We started having coffee together, then lunch. He listened to me in a way that Tom never did. He made me feel valued and appreciated. Did you intend to hurt your husband? Never. I was just trying to find some happiness. I thought maybe if I could feel good about myself again, I could figure out how to fix my marriage. It was a masterful performance. Rachel came across as a woman who had made mistakes, but whose heart was in the right place. She admitted to the affair, but framed it as the desperate act of a lonely, neglected wife. Then Patricia began her cross-examination. Mrs. Carter, you testified that you met Mr. Weller at a work conference. When was this conference? Last February, I think. Patricia consulted her notes. According to the hotel records we've obtained, you and Mr. Weller checked into the Marriott downtown on the same night in January, 6 weeks before the conference you mentioned. Would you like to revise your testimony about when your relationship began? Rachel's composure cracked slightly. I might be confused about the dates. Are you also confused about the $8,000 in marital funds you spent on your relationship with Mr. Weller? Tom and I had joint accounts. I had every right to use that money. For personal expenses, yes. But did you have the right to use marital funds to pay for hotel rooms where you had sex with another man? Hartwell objected, but Judge Chen overruled her. Answer the question, Mrs. Carter. I wasn't thinking about the money. I was just trying to be happy. Patricia introduced the credit card statements, going through them line by line. Romano's restaurant, the same night Rachel had told me she was working late. The cabin rental, during Rachel's supposed girls' weekend with Lisa. Hotel charges that corresponded exactly with nights when Rachel had claimed to be at work conferences or visiting friends. Mrs. Carter, did you tell your husband you were going on a girls' weekend with your sister Lisa last March? I might have. But you actually went to a cabin with Mr. Weller, didn't you? Yes. And you paid for that cabin with a joint credit card that your husband was responsible for paying? Yes. So you lied to your husband about where you were going and then made him pay for your romantic weekend with another man? Rachel's face was flushed now. It wasn't like that. What was it like, Mrs. Carter? I was confused. I was unhappy. I wasn't thinking clearly. Then Patricia played the recording. The courtroom was silent as Rachel's voice filled the air, talking about taking me to the cleaners and calling our marriage a charade. Rachel sat frozen in the witness chair, her face pale as she listened to her own words. "Mrs. Carter, is that your voice on the recording?" "Yes." "And you're discussing your plan to financially destroy your husband in the divorce proceedings?" I was angry. People say things when they're angry. "You also refer to your 21-year marriage as a charade. Did you mean that?" I was trying to justify what I was doing. I knew it was wrong, but I was trying to make myself feel better about it. "By planning to steal everything your husband had worked for?" "I wasn't going to steal anything. I just wanted what was fair." "What would be fair, Mrs. Carter? 50% of the assets you helped accumulate, or 100% of the assets while your husband got nothing?" Rachel broke down crying on the witness stand. "I don't know. I wasn't thinking straight. I just wanted the pain to stop." It was a devastating cross-examination. Patricia had methodically destroyed Rachel's credibility and exposed her lies without ever raising her voice or showing emotion. The rest of the trial was almost anticlimactic. Hartwell called character witnesses who testified about Rachel's professionalism and integrity, but their testimony seemed hollow after the recording had been played. Patricia presented our financial expert, who calculated the exact amount of marital funds Rachel had dissipated and explained how her actions had violated her fiduciary duty to the marital estate. Alex testified on my behalf, describing how Rachel had tried to turn him against me with lies and manipulation. His testimony was brief but powerful, a son defending his father against his mother's betrayal. Jessica chose not to testify for either side, but her presence in the courtroom sitting behind me spoke volumes about where her loyalties now lay. In her closing argument, Hartwell tried to salvage what she could from the wreckage of Rachel's testimony. "Your Honor, Rachel Carter made mistakes. She admits that. But those mistakes don't justify the vindictive campaign of harassment and humiliation that her husband has waged against her. She deserves to be treated with dignity and fairness, not destroyed because she fell in love with the wrong man." Patricia's closing was surgical. "Your Honor, this case is about consequences. Rachel Carter made a series of deliberate choices over many months. She chose to lie to her husband. She chose to steal marital funds to support her affair. She chose to plan his financial destruction. Now she wants this court to protect her from the consequences of those choices." Patricia reviewed the evidence one final time, emphasizing the pattern of deception and the systematic dissipation of marital assets. "Mr. Carter is not asking this court to punish his wife for adultery. He's asking for justice. He's asking to be made whole after being defrauded by the person he trusted most in the world." Judge Chen took a brief recess to review her notes, then returned with her ruling. "This court finds that the respondent, Rachel Carter, engaged in systematic dissipation of marital assets in furtherance of an extramarital relationship. The evidence clearly shows a pattern of deception and financial misconduct that violated her fiduciary duties to the marital estate. She ordered Rachel to reimburse me for the full $8,000 she had dissipated, plus interest and court costs. The remaining marital assets were to be divided 60-40 in my favor, with Rachel receiving the smaller share as a consequence of her misconduct. Furthermore, Judge Chen continued, this court finds no basis for an award of maintenance to the respondent. Mrs. Carter is a capable professional who can support herself. Her decision to engage in conduct that destroyed the marriage does not entitle her to ongoing financial support from the petitioner. It was a complete victory. I would walk away with the majority of our assets. Rachel would get nothing beyond her smaller share of what remained, and she would have to pay me back every penny she'd stolen to fund her affair. As we left the courthouse, Rachel's parents tried to approach me. "Tom," Robert said, "this has gone far enough. You've made your point. Can't we find some way to—" "No, Robert. We can't. Your daughter made her choices, and now she has to live with the consequences. Just like I've had to live with the consequences of trusting her." I walked away from them, from Rachel, from the whole toxic mess that my marriage had become. Patricia was already talking about the timeline for asset division, and the mechanics of enforcing the judgment, but I was barely listening. It was over. After a year of investigation, preparation, and legal warfare, it was finally over. That night, I sat in my apartment with a beer and called Alex and Jessica to tell them about the outcome. They were both relieved that the ordeal was finally finished, though I could hear the sadness in their voices. They'd lost their family, their sense of security, their faith in their mother's honesty. But they'd also learned something valuable about consequences, about integrity, about standing up for yourself when people try to destroy you. A week later, I got a call from Danny Morrison, the private investigator. "Thought you'd want to know," he said. "Mark Weller was arrested in Phoenix yesterday. Apparently he tried the same scam on another married woman, but her husband was connected to some people who don't handle betrayal as legally as you did. Is he okay? He'll live. But he's looking at assault charges, and his victim's husband is pressing for prosecution on fraud charges too. Looks like Mark's run of luck with other men's wives has finally run out." I felt a grim satisfaction at the news. Mark had gotten away clean when he'd fled town, but apparently he hadn't learned his lesson. Now he was facing consequences that were much worse than anything I'd threatened him with. 3 months later, I was back in my house, our house, which was now just my house. Rachel had moved in with her parents temporarily while she looked for an apartment she could afford on her reduced circumstances. I'd kept most of the furniture and personal items that mattered to me. Rachel got her clothes, her jewelry, and her car. Everything else stayed with me, along with the memories of what we'd once had and what she'd thrown away. Alex and Jessica came by regularly. We were rebuilding our relationship slowly, carefully. They were both in college now, starting their own adult lives, but they still needed their father, and I needed them too. On a warm Saturday in May, almost exactly a year after the BBQ that had started this whole nightmare, I was working in my garage when Jessica stopped by. "Hey, Dad, what are you working on?" "Rebuilding a carburetor for Mrs. Henderson's old Buick. She could buy a new car, but she loves this one." "Some things are worth fixing," Jessica said. "Some things are. Others are better off replaced." She sat down on my workbench, watching me work. "I talked to Mom yesterday," she said. "How's she doing?" "Not great. She's lonely, I think. She keeps asking about you, wondering if you ever think about reconciling." I looked up from the carburetor. "What do you tell her?" "I tell her that some things can't be fixed once they're broken. That trust, once it's gone, doesn't come back just because you want it to." That's very wise. I learned it from my dad. We worked together in comfortable silence for a while, father and daughter, rebuilding something that was worth saving. Outside, spring was turning to summer, and life was moving forward. Rachel would have to find her own way now, live with her own choices, face her own consequences. As for me, I was exactly where I belonged, in my garage, fixing things that could be fixed, surrounded by the people who had chosen to stand by me when it mattered most.